we're your partners in this work, and we'll continue to be so going forward. We're not going anywhere. Our board is strong, our organization is strong, and so you can count on us. And enjoy the session today, and let's look forward to a much brighter 2021. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here.
All right, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. That was an excellent introduction by Dave Gordon. We're gonna go ahead and get started. We really appreciate the introduction on the presentation. Let's go ahead and get started. And as mentioned, we have Dr. Fortune, who is at my side, and then myself, Rex Fortune III.
And good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for joining us. I'm Rex Fortune. I'm currently the president of the board for Pacific Charter Institute, and we have, I believe, some participants from PCI on with us this afternoon. But in addition to that, I am president of Fortune and Associates. And I bring to this discussion about 50 years of experience as a high school teacher, school site administrator, as a superintendent of schools in Los Angeles County and in Sacramento County for a total of 20 years, as a state administrator for about a dozen years, and for the last 17 years, a writer and researcher, most of which is focused on the topics that we'll talk about today. So a partner of mine over the last decade and plus has been Rex III. And Rex, maybe you say a few introductory comments about yourself.
Okay. Briefly, I've been in the education industry for the past 24, going on 25 years now. The first 12 was working at Project Pipeline, now called the Fortune School of Education, working as a director of teacher recruitment, and later on working as a program coordinator of professional development for teachers through the credential program. And my background is in human resources training and development. I've been with Fortune and Associates for the past 12 years, helping Dr. Fortune to develop books and videos and materials on how to close the academic achievement gap. So our workshop agenda today, I think we can cross number 1 off for the introductions. We're gonna talk about the academic achievement gap. We're gonna talk about research, best school practices, and a case study. Then we're gonna take a break. We're going to come back and talk about best parenting practices and parenting engagement, family engagement, then conclusion, and then you'll see a post-session Q&A. And we're doing that because we have like almost a 2-hour presentation that we're packing into an hour and a half. We want to make sure that we honor that time. And so we will be answering some questions along the way, but if you'd like to wait till after the session, we will hang around afterwards to answer your questions and also questions in chat as well. So thank you so much for being here today, and let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing we're doing is we're going to talk about the academic achievement gap. We'll talk about evidence of the achievement gap. Can the achievement gap be bridged? And can lessons from a few successful situations be scaled up?
Well, since so many of you have been dealing with this issue of the achievement gap, we're not going to belabor the point, but we want to at least establish that what we're concerned about is, as you look at the performance of African-American students and Hispanic students on state tests in mathematics and in English, you will see that these levels of proficiency for these two groups are lower than the levels of proficiency for white students and Asian students in those subjects. And that difference between these two groups, African-American Hispanics generally speaking, and white and Asians generally speaking, is what we're talking about, what we used in our research as it relates to achievement gap. So notice that these are data from 2019, and of course, we've been observing this over the years in California since there's been data collection. The two groups that we made reference to, Hispanics or Latino students and African-American students, you can see by this pie chart that comes from a publication from the Legislative Analyst's Office that they constitute well over half the population of public school students in the state. And so to the extent that there's a need to address their achievement, that's a significant statewide need. And therefore, visually, we can see that this is something that should not be ignored.
So we come up with a poll question for you, and we're going to go ahead and get that up and going. Does your school district or school site use achievement gap data by ethnicity to adjust instruction? You have the answers of yes, no, I'm not certain, and we're going to go ahead and launch that poll now. So if you can go ahead and mark which one. Give you a few more seconds for that. All right, so a little bit of a race here between yes and I'm not certain. We'll go ahead and looks like everybody's got their answers in. Now it looks like that for the results that is almost equal for yes and I'm not certain, and a few people said no as well. So that's fine. So that's fantastic. Those of you who are doing it. For the I'm not certain, that's okay too, and the no. And perhaps at the end of this presentation, some of you may say, hey, yes, it sounds like something that we may be interested in doing in the future.
So two publications we're going to reference here, both have the titles Bridging the Achievement Gap, What Successful Educators and Parents Do. On the left, we published the first study, it's almost 500 pages long, the first edition, where we described some 20 schools, 17 of which serve mostly Hispanic students, 3 of which serve mostly African-American students. They were selected because their performance, and you will note this terminology is no longer being used, but they had an academic performance indicator of 800 or higher. 800 was the goal for the state at the time. And these schools that are featured in the book, we described what the leaders were doing, what teachers were doing, what parents in chapter 4 were doing. And there was other research that was quoted in there. And that was the first edition. Well, obviously, as we were doing presentations in 2013, the state made major changes in its curricular leadership, shifting from content standards to Common Core standards in English language arts, mathematics, social studies, and so on, and changed its test from the California State Standards test to the CAASPP. So it raised the question then, were these schools that we were describing and talking about in this first edition, was that still relevant given so many changes at the state? So we published the second edition. And the second edition focused on the new test, the CAASPP, but it raised the same question. Are there schools in the state that defy this trend of the achievement gap by those schools showing that their students are performing higher than, and in this instance, the bar was higher than the statewide average for African-American students? Because in this book, we focused on schools that were at least 50% enrolled by African-American students. So what we're looking for were the anomalies, you might say. Were there successful schools using the new test, acknowledging a new emphasis on Common Core standards? And some of you will read from pages from this book today. Some of you actually received copies of the book if you haven't already. And notice that that book was published in 2018, the second edition. And that will be the focus of a good deal of our discussion. But I don't want to lose track of the fact that these 20 schools here, again, mostly Hispanic, we discovered later, I'll not present that data here, but I have it available. And that is that about at least 10 of those schools were performing well on the 2019 CAASPP. They were selected because they had API scores, but in fact, they did well on the new state testing as well. We have evidence of that. But we'll shift now our attention to the second edition. And in the second edition, we identified some 11 schools that met the criteria of being, their performance was higher than the statewide average for African-American students in English language arts, and the reference year in this case was 2018. And that was 32% proficient. It was not a very high bar, but that's what the statewide average was. So we're looking at schools that did better than the statewide average that served mostly African-American students. And lo and behold, 4 of those 11 schools did higher than the statewide average for all students. And I'd like to just take note of those 4. Baldwin Hills, a traditional elementary school in Los Angeles Unified. Fortune School, a charter school located here in Sacramento County and in San Bernardino. Cowan Avenue School in Los Angeles Unified. I don't know, Richard, are you here today?
We I don't know that he's here yet, but I am here. Christina Smith Corleone and I work with him.
Oh, yes, yes. Thank you for joining us. And you are a teacher there at Cowan Avenue, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. And we may ask for some comments from you later. But,
okay.
And then from Wilder Prep, we have the CEO of Wilder Prep, Ms. Ramona Wilder. Are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Yes, okay. And we're going to ask the question for all of us. How is it that this school is better than 80% African-American, performing at a level where they score 80% proficient in English language arts at the elementary level on the statewide test? And so that's part of what our research has been to do, to find those anomalies, those examples, and then to describe what those schools are doing. And so for each of the schools listed along the border here, there is in the second edition a description of what those schools are doing. Now, if you ask the question, well then, are all of them doing exactly the same thing? And the answer is no. But there are some commonalities as you look across these 11 characteristics of the practices in the schools. If you look at number 1 and number 2 together, both the school leaders and the teachers in those schools hold high expectations for their students. The leaders only hire teachers who believe that this population of students that they're serving, though they are the lowest achieving group on the statewide test, that they can in fact become high achievers. And if the teachers are reluctant or not quite sure if that's the case, they're not employed in such schools. They expect them to do well, not only on the state test, but on their local assessments, on their weekly grades. They expect them to prepare for high school classes leading to college. In fact, some of those schools have college prep in their titles, and they take that title seriously. If you look at numbers 3 and 7 together on parent engagement, again, all of these schools emphasize the importance of parent involvement in various ways. They ask the parents to support the school's culture and the school rules. For example, some of the schools have uniforms, and they expect the parents to help work with them to ensure that the students abide by the uniform rules. They ask the parents to monitor students' homework nightly. They ask the school asks the parents to attend critical meetings. Parent conferences, yes, but also other special meetings that they may call the parents to. Some schools go further by providing, in number 7, providing parent academies or some other form of training to help parents assist their children at home. If you look at numbers 4 and 10 together on instructional strategies, many of these schools create ways to provide extra instructional time for students. Some of the schools start at 7:30 in the morning and they run to 4 in the afternoon. Some offer Saturday instructions for students who need more time. Some look at the school year calendar and create several intersessions, that is to say, times when all students are not coming, but they bring back those students who need extra help. So rather than 176 days per year, some of those students get over 200 days per year, more time the students need in some instances to get a high achievement. They also, in the terms of number 10, teachers do frequent assessments, and weekly they meet, sometimes by grade level, other times by content areas, but across grade levels. But nevertheless, the purpose of the meeting is to examine how well did our students do this past week, what changes do we need to make in instruction for the next week. So they use the data on student performance, the student assessment data, to plan for instructional strategy changes in 4 and 10. Now 9, as Mr. Superintendent Gordon just talked about a few moments ago, all of you in California, in fact, many schools throughout the nation have become more expert in using technology platforms. But even before the pandemic hit in March, when most of our schools went into distance learning, most of these schools had already expanded the use of technology to extend learning times on basic skills, to target specific math problems based on individual needs. Some of them used the technology to communicate with parents using programs like Class Dojo or some other software that they were in communication with parents by the hour, not so much just periodic meetings. And most of the schools had technology that they used for their websites to communicate with the general public. I would speed along to mention professional development. I'll just comment that there are others of these that I won't make detailed comments about, but professional development was critical among all the schools that we studied. Most of them had at least a half a day a week where teachers gathered together and in a collegial way examine how they could improve instruction for the remaining weeks. Some went so far as to get their training from the State Department of Education on Common Core, on test prep, on the digital library. Some other schools sent their principals and school coaches to New York, to Houston, or wherever the Achievement First schools in the nation had high performance for high minority schools. So professional development is a critical aspect that took on different dimensions in different schools, but nevertheless was a common thread throughout these. The last one I will make reference to community supporters. Sometimes these were individuals in the community, local businesses in the community. Sometimes they were civic organizations, as these schools may have issues that had to go before the city council or before the county board of education or before district board of education. Community supporters are important. I think I'll wrap it up on that, but these are the common threads across the 11 schools that we studied in the second edition of the Achievement Gap book.
And we had an excellent question that was in chat. And the question was, were the schools that we showed earlier on that list all charter schools? And so the answer to that is no. So the number one school that was on the list in the far right, which we mentioned, Wilders Prep, is a charter school. The next school that we mentioned was Cowan Avenue Elementary School, which is a traditional school, traditional elementary school. And further down the list, so it's a combination of charter schools and then traditional schools that we have this information that Dr. Fortune just went. And so those are the best school practices from the combination of the traditional schools and charter schools together. All right, so with that said, we just mentioned Wilders Prep a few times today, and we're gonna use them as our case study as the top school for producing and closing the achievement gap with a high number of African-American students, as well as high number of students on free and reduced price meals. So our first activity is going to be a video, and it's going to be a video on Wilders Preparatory Academy located in Inglewood, California. And we have the link that's inside of the screen, and it's also going to be appearing in chat box. And what you want to do is First of all, you may also see on your screen that there's a note-taking guide. So you want to download the note-taking guide if you haven't already done so. And after you have the note-taking guide, go ahead and click on the link. You can go to the chat box and click on that link, and that will take you to a new screen to a YouTube video. And we'll give you about 3 minutes or so to watch that video, and then we'll have you come back. And what you want to do is write notes in your note-taking guide on practices that you saw that were successful practices that you'd like to know a little bit more about, or something that you observed in the video. All right, so we'll give you 3 minutes to watch that video, and we'll see you back real soon. And the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do a reading activity for those of you who have already finished watching the video. And what you're gonna see is outtakes of pages from our book. And that's gonna also be on Waldorf's Preparatory Academy. And what we'd like for you to do is read those pages that you'll see the link coming in your chat box now. And this is again, page 62 through 69 of the Bridging the Achievement Gap book, second edition. So you want to continue taking notes in your note-taking guide for an upcoming breakout session where you're going to discuss both the video and the book a little further in small groups. All right, so I know that was kind of quick, so some of you may still have a few more words to finish there. We're going to go ahead and move on, and certainly you're welcome to continue reading the rest of the materials in your, and those of you who came in through SCOE will be getting a copy of the book as well, so you have a chance to read the information on Wilders Preparatory Academy. What we'd like for you to do now is go into a breakout activity in which we're going to say, ask you, which of the best practices did you observe from either the video or the reading in the Wilder case study? And with that, each group is going to select a reporter to share what their observations were in the Zoom chat box and highlight some of the things that you observed during the video and also in your readings as well. So we're going to go ahead and set up those breakout rooms here. Those are some really great observations. So thank you so much for sharing that about the intervention and about the retention of teachers and some of the other observations that you saw. So those were great. So anyone else that would like to share real briefly on what their observation was, maybe their top observation? And unmute yourself. We have one more volunteer.
Okay, I'll go. My name's Christina. I noticed in the video they use a lot of AMP strategies and chanting. I liked how I saw children put on their thinking caps. Really getting them with some hands-on participation, which made it really engaging.
Excellent. Those are great viewpoints as well. Some great observations. Dr. Fortune, did you want to say something?
No, I guess we better hear from the Wilder representatives. Any one or two specific things that you'd like to highlight, and include in that anything you're doing with parents, please. Ms. Robinson or
Ms. Patrick Lewis.
Or Ms. Patrick Lewis?
Yes. Hi. Trying to get unmuted here. Okay. Again, glad to be here. Just another thing that you wanted me to highlight on parent engagement. So, of course, there's a difference between being on campus and being off campus. And so during just the distance learning, we've just, had our monthly parent meetings. I try to stay engaged with the parents or in contact with them weekly, just so they know what's going on, virtually. On campus, it's a different story. They kind of, we have an open door policy, we allow parents to, observe as they need to. We're in constant contact with them whenever, the students are not doing so well or, just trying to create a plan for achievement, so that they can succeed. Ms. Paget.
Yes, I'll chime in. Greetings to all, and thank you again, Dr. Fortune, for this opportunity. I would say that as far as Wilders is concerned, in a traditional setting, of course, we've made great strides on our parent engagement and the ways in which we go about doing that. I primarily work in the middle school capacity as the 7th and 8th grade ELA teacher. And I would say that there's a continuum that we see at the elementary school that carries itself out into the middle school reality. As mentioned in the comment earlier, there is a close-knit experience that we have on the campus that is felt in the building, but I would even say in this virtual setting, because of that foundation that has been made, we're able to really build upon that premise. Empirical observations are still out with COVID and the realities of the pandemic and what we're dealing with as it relates to parent participation and involvement. But I would say we've even increased. Our school leaders are excellent in setting the foundation around how we engage as a collective, as a team, and then how that is an extension to our parents as then well as our students. And so what we find, of course, as mentioned in the video, yes, and Dr. Fortune, you mentioned how we use platforms of Class Dojo, how we're using email and such. That is just only intensified in this setting. And I would say as a classroom teacher, what we're finding is that parents have a sense of comfort whereby they feel that they can come to us. And even as it relates to setting up platforms with Google Calls and being able to make phone calls. One of the things that we did effectively from the standpoint of our leadership is set in motion our parent conferences right now so that we can inform students and parents of their progress so that those gaps that we can anticipate as a result of the pandemic are not worsened. And so keeping that parent communication is so key so that there is no achievement gap that is felt. And we're continuing with those elements that we already had in the traditional setting and intensifying those processes in this virtual learning experience as well.
Excellent. We have a question that came from chat that anyone from Wilder Prep can answer. That Jennifer mentioned that she was curious about the arts and measure for creativity. I don't know if you guys had any comments about that, brief comments.
Sure, I can speak to that. I work very intensively as it relates to the arts at Wilders. And one of the things that we find as a part of our curriculum is number one, it being culturally relevant. And so a great part of that is incorporating the arts into our curriculum and weaving it into the learning experience of our students. And so you will walk through the building and hear in any capacity of singing. We have wonderful teachers who bring their talent of art to the classroom, and that's exemplified in the hallways. And that is even carried over into this synchronous and asynchronous learning experience where our teachers are still cultivating the artistic element. Last year, though it was COVID, we put on a poetry slam virtually, and it was excellent. And we chose a theme where our students were able to talk about being together apart, and our students just showcase their talent. And it was wonderful to hear their perspectives on though we are apart, we are yet still together. And they did that through spoken word, they did that through rap, they did that through poems. And we continue that with our Black History program that we have every year, which has been a staple as a part of the Wilder community. The director of that is a woman who is just a great asset to our community, Miss Gibson, and she helps to garner all of the talent of the students and involve the parents in that as well. So it's really a beautiful community experience for us to come together in a theater that is rented out and showcase K through 8, all of our students. I'm involved in the directing and choreography and just getting students involved. It's an extension of teaching our students about Black history, which is indelible to our curriculum with the reading samples that we have and the instruction that we have. So this is a part of the fabric of who we are. The arts, it carries itself out. We would be preparing for our Kingdom Day Parade, which we have done for the past 7 years. We have a step team, and just keeping students engaged is really what it's about, but it turns also into our parents being very much involved in that process as well.
Okay, that is an excellent lead to our need to get back on time with the break. We do need to take a full break. Can we do some stretching?
So what we'll do is we're going to do a 7th inning stretch here. If you need to take a break, absolutely do so. But we're in the interest of time. We're just going to stretch in our chair. Just kind of, there you go. So kind of go back and forth. All right. And if you do need to take a break, we totally understand. But in the interest of time, we're going to go on. All right. And thank you, everyone, for your participation. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Wild Prep Academy. Really appreciate all of your information and your suggestions and everybody's observations. Now, one of the questions that just came up in chat was about family engagement and what do you do? What are some of the strategies? And you might recognize this person over to your left, and that's Dr. Steve Constantino. And he spoke at one of the earlier FACE workshops. I believe it was November of 2019, I want to say. I was there, plenty of you were probably there as well. And what you see on your screen now is a chart that he shared with us about some parent or family engagement activities and what impact they have on student learning outcomes. So on the high-end spectrum, on the right-hand side of the screen, you see that there's family socialization, academic socialization, interactive homework design, home learning support. One of you mentioned in the chat about home visits or maybe phone calling at home. So home visits is definitely something that you'd want to do. That would be a high impact item action. Also on the low end of the spectrum, and we don't want to call it actually low because it's still something that is really supported, and we see it in some of the schools that we are highlighting, and that's including the school websites, the weekly newsletters, social media, volunteering. So parent volunteers, that's very important. So it may not be as impactful as a home visit, or maybe making a phone call a minute a day with each student to see how they're doing, especially in this environment. But it's still something that's very important. Now, you may be wondering, why do we have something orange in the middle of the screen that's highlighted? We're going to talk about parent learning because that's what we do here at Fortune Associates. I'm going to go more into that.
From chapters 4 in the first book we mentioned, the first edition of Bridging the Achievement Gap, and chapter 4 of the second edition, we devoted a chapter in each of those books to parenting practices. And from there, we extracted some dozen ideas that we got from parents whose children were doing well in school. And they were responding to the question, so what are you doing that you believe contributes to your students performing so well at school? And so we produced that in Spanish, and we produced that in English. We produced that in Chinese traditional as well as simplified. And we're not going to go through every one of those topics, but there are 12 topics. And we have used this document, which is available on our website. We have used this document even with parents of middle school and high school parent academy meetings. So on vocabulary building, for example, though the language in the pamphlet talks of reading to your child before they can talk, something that parents of very young children would do, we would say to parents of high school students, have your high school students pull out the editorial section of the Sacramento Bee, read that section, and as they run into words they don't know, let's look up those words and start their vocabulary building, even as they are high school students and maybe should know such words. I'll not go through each of the others, but I'll just say for number 5, number 2, Number 10, which we will talk about a little bit more, those are developed in such a way that when we do the parent academies, we have pullouts talking where the parents can meet and have discussion points around that. And they share among themselves, as in 5, for example. How do you communicate with the teachers at your school? What do you do to do that? And you have different parents expressing different points of view, and they capture this. And these are part of what goes on in the Parent Academy. I'll not do all 12 of these, but on number 10, we're going to take a deep dive on that because parents of particular middle school and high school students sometimes need resources that are beyond their ability to help their children at home. So Rex, why don't you tell us a little bit about that activity?
Okay, we're going to go a little bit more into number 10, and that's resources. And what we suggest, and what we call parenting practice number 10, that's in the parenting practices guide, is that parents should seek out resources. And other resources can be within the community or the school that can help a child study effectively. And with that said, we have a tool that might be helpful to you, and it's about to show up in the chat right now. And it was also available in the downloadable materials. And this is something you'll just go over individually. Take a look at handout number 4. And how might you use this tool with parents and caregivers at your school? And you can add your comments to chat. And we'll give you a little moment to take a look at it. So we have some good ideas, and we're going to continue going. But I want to see what Bome Pei, if I pronounced your name correctly, she was saying use completed forms in a raffle. I think that's an excellent idea. So how to engage your parents to looking at, or caregivers are looking at this form, and make it something that's interesting for them to read and partake in, and see what we can do for the parents to help their students at home. All right, and we also have Kathy Wilson saying the form could be used and ongoing, starting from the beginning of the school year and have them checked during the year. Can use during home or bridge visits. I think that's excellent. All right, so thank you for participating in that activity. And
Board President from SCOE had a question, and can you raise your question now? Did she hear me?
can you say that one more time, Dan?
Connie, can you call on the president of the board from SCOE?
I think she may have stepped away now.
Oh, okay, good. All right, let us continue, and we're going to have to do it rapidly. So I'm going to, can we go to the next one? I'm going to say that we're going to make some comments about how we do parent academy training, how Rex and I have done several of these in a few years. And these topics on the left are actually tabs that appear in a 3-hole binder that you see in the middle of your screen, this orange in the cap and all that. And for each of those, we have whatever research we have on the relationship, for example, between attendance and student performance, or good behavior in school and student performance. We frequently will do a workshop and invite in teachers from the school where we're doing the workshop, so that for English, math, science, we would have teachers whose role would be to tell parents how the Common Core is a bit different from what they normally do in English language arts or mathematics or science. And here's how they could be helpful with their students at home. On air technology, there's probably a good deal that could be said about that, and we've said something, but the real point is we often will have the technology. Let's say if the students use Chromebooks, bring it into let the parents get familiar with that instrument and let them learn how it is that they can help their students with that or get more information about that. On college and careers, we bring in representatives from the community college, the state university, or UC, and they are talking to elementary parents and saying it's not too early to start having activities that relate to preparing your kids and to think about and prepare for going to college. Now, all of this is about the ways in which we have done parent academy trainings prior to the pandemic. And one of the things we're going to have as a follow-up is to send to you questions that we would hope you would raise with your parents. Is now that we have distance learning as a feature of the schools and may continue, what are your needs now? What are your needs about, what do you need to know about hardware? What software information do you need to know? And those parent survey could help frame future parent academy trainings. Let's go to the next one here. I'll just simply say here quickly that for all of the trainings that we've done, we have evaluations. And what you can see is, just look at the numbers on the right, the percentage of parents who found what we were talking about in these parent academies as being helpful and or very helpful, the very high percentages. The lowest number you see there is 95% of the parents. We would encourage that you have parent evaluations along with your parent trainings. But there are other alternative ways of delivering this, correct?
So other ways to do it beyond having something on site. We mentioned that we have parent academies, and that's one model. And all of you are doing parent engagement at this point. But some online resource tools that are available to you. I want to, not to put you on the spot, Lizette, if you're here, but we want to talk about your Natomas Unified School District's Natomas Parent University. And that website has parent engagement resources and videos, and I have the website address there and some screenshots on your far right-hand side of the screen. There's elementary, middle school, high school videos, including such topics as the importance of attendance. Center Unified also here, and I know we have a good representation from Center here today, has utilized Love and Logic, which offers educators and parent engagement classes, webinars, articles, and blogs at loveandlogic.com. And so some of that is not free, but you could definitely have like a speaker from there participate in a Zoom meeting like we're doing to engage the parents. Another thing that we wanted to let you know is we now have for free on our YouTube channel, Fortune and Associates, videos on our Parent Academy topics that Dr. Fortune just mentioned. So that includes topics such as educational technology, getting ready for college careers, behavior, how to develop positive behavior. Who are your kids looking at as role models, and are those the right people to have as their role model? We have about 11 topics altogether, talking about attendance as well and other areas too, which there's several videos in each topic. So you just go to our YouTube channel, then look at the playlist, and the playlist has the topics and all the videos for those corresponding topics, and all that's free for you guys to utilize.
Yep.
All right, which brings us to our next breakout session. We're gonna make this a quick breakout session. And what we'd like for you to do is to share what your district or school is doing to support parent learning. And we mentioned what some school districts are already doing. And then how might your district or school enhance its parent learning practices with some ideas that you may have learned today that works. So let's go ahead and get that set up here. So what we're gonna do is find out some of the things that you guys discussed. And so somebody wanted to unmute themselves with a quick response, maybe a 30-second response to some of the things that you guys discussed that's helpful for you or things that you're already doing. Do we have any takers?
I'll go. Sarah and I, we just talked about student accountability and just consistency across the board. And so it was just interesting to see, we talked about this, the comparison of the beginning of the pandemic and, where we are now as a school, and just recognizing like I said, the consistency during virtual learning and just making the students accountable, as well as their parents accountable for the success. We're not always going to be in virtual learning. And so just thinking ahead and what that's going to look like in the future, and just preparing them for that.
That was excellent. Thank you so much.
Ms. Robinson.
Anybody else?
One of the I was just going to share that one of the things our group kind of just tapped on really quickly was how important it is to get communications out to parents in a timely manner so that they can be on board with things for their kids that they're facing every day. And with Elk Grove and Rio Linda, one of the great supports here in Sacramento County is the Sacramento Education Cable Consortium. And I just wanted to give them a shout out because they also have a family and a community engagement community of practice. And if you're in the area and you're not part of that, I highly recommend it. Just for this exact same thing. I think Lizette and Kathy and I are probably on, Monica and, Connie, different ones are part of these groups on a regular basis, because whether it's recording a Zoom or it's getting on Spotify or screen, Kathy, remind me the name again. There was just different resources that we can use to get information out to parents in a timely manner so they can be successful with their kiddos.
Great.
Jennifer, Screencastify.
There it is. Thank you. Screencastify.
You're welcome.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was a great information that you shared there for everyone. And I want to see, well, let's do this. In the interest of time, we're going to continue going on. And thank you for everyone for your participation and input on the exercise. That was great. Thank you. All right. So a summary of Parent Academy benefits is that the Parent Academy can help families to get helpful tools and connections that benefit their students and bridge the achievement gap. Parents appreciate academies to help them to assist with children at home. And Elk Grove Unified was just mentioned, and principals from Elk Grove Unified, particularly from Harriet Eddy School and Laguna Creek High School, who have used our parent academies, feel like the key to achieving success is to implement parenting practices immediately. And investing in parent engagement activities early in the school year gives parents the ability to request targeted help in a timely basis.
So when we take a look at where we were an hour and a half ago, we were acknowledging that we have an achievement gap that disproportionately affects African-American and Hispanic students. But we quickly got to the point, but that's not the whole story. The important story is that there are enough examples of schools where Hispanic students are doing well and African-American students are doing well. Not only is documented in our work, but in many studies that predate us. I'm reminded of the book, Work Hard, Be Nice, by the founders of KIPP schools. Two of the KIPP schools that we have in our group were KIPP schools. And these are students from low-income families, 80% of them are, 95% are Black or Hispanic. They were able to move students from the 34th percentile at the beginning of the 5th grade to the 58th percentile at the end of the 7th grade. And then in mathematics, from the 44th percentile to the 83rd percentile in mathematics on standardized tests. KIPP is a nationwide example of people finding schools that are doing well and distributing to others. They had 66 schools in 19 states in the District of Columbia back in 2009 when this publication was done. They were expecting to be in the 24,000 students in 100 school districts by 2011. I haven't read the report on that, but my point is that this description we're giving in our research is not a standalone research that has never been done before. I would like to make the second point is that given that these examples exist, that school boards, district superintendents, and our school leaders can take some of these promising practices and replicate them in their schools if indeed they are convinced that the student population can achieve higher than they're doing now. And we believe that that's to be the case. And finally here, replicating these school practices and parent engagement practices, as well as the school operation practices, can make a difference in bridging the achievement gap.